The Good Samaritan story is presented in Luke 10. I believe the message of this ministry accurately reflects the message of the kingdom of heaven, which is, if we have any expectation of achieving our hope, then we must attend to the will of God here on earth while we're still alive. As we pointed out in the Good Samaritan Part 1 message, Jesus specifically instructs us that demonstrating charity and mercy, which are mere will components that fall under the umbrella of the royal law, will achieve everlasting life. While we're incapable of attending to the will of God all the time, we're obligated to do our best and repent when we fail. While this message isn't presented to you from the direct passages of the Good Samaritan story, it does reflect the message meant for us and how we attend to the will of God. This message is born out of a psychology-based study to determine why and when we stop to assist others in need. Now, regardless if you endorse the findings of psychology-based studies or not, the conclusions of this study should be meaningful to all Christians. In 1973, two behavioral scientists, Darley and Batson, were interested in assessing the psychological mindset of prosocial behavior. That is, why some people assist others in need while some fail to do so. The study would mimic the Good Samaritan story, in which the test subjects would come across a man who appears to be in need of assistance. The subjects they decided to use in this study were students from the Princeton Theological Seminary. Students who were studying to be priests. Obviously, these students were in seminary school for a reason, and that reason is more than likely because they identify with the message of the kingdom of heaven and the will of God, which instructs us to provide charity and demonstrate mercy to those in need. Over a period of a few days, the subjects were asked to complete a survey which included questions regarding why they were faithful Christians. Were they focused more on achieving their hope or doing good in the world, like demonstrating love, charity, mercy, etc.? Then they were instructed to prepare a sermon regarding the purpose or basis of the Good Samaritan story. In other words, what was Jesus' intent for us to learn from his telling of the story? It's important to underscore who these subjects were and what their assignments included, at least in part. They were seminary students on a path to become priests. Their assignment was to study the tenets of the Good Samaritan story, create a sermon reflecting those tenets, and present that sermon to others. So we can assume the tenets of the Good Samaritan story, that of charity and mercy, were in the forefront of their minds. The subjects were instructed what they needed to do to complete the study, which included walking from their building to an adjacent building to provide their sermon on the Good Samaritan story. To reach the adjacent building, they had to travel through a narrow passage in which a person would be situated in the middle of the passage, on the ground, moaning and coughing, demonstrating obvious signs he was in distress and in need of assistance. The researchers staged the man in the passage in such a way that to reach the adjacent building, the subjects would need to navigate themselves up and over the man, ensuring the subjects would be required to visualize the man up close and hear him moan and cough. The assumption being, Anyone who came upon this man would understand he required assistance. Before setting off on the adventure, each subject was randomly provided a time condition. Some were instructed they had plenty of time to make it to their next appointment. Some were instructed they were on schedule, but they should probably go now to avoid being late. Some were instructed they were already behind schedule and they would more than likely be late. The results of the experiment indicated that those who entered the seminary to do good in the world were no more likely to assist a man in need than any of the others. What mattered was if the subjects thought they had enough time to assist the man in need and still make it to their next appointment on time. In fact, 90% of those who were instructed they were already late for their appointment failed to provide assistance. 55% of those who were instructed they were on time for their appointment failed to provide assistance. And 37% of those who had the time to stop failed to provide assistance. Overall, the experiment demonstrated that over 60% of the seminary subjects failed to assist the man in need. The conclusion of this study suggests that if we just create more time for ourselves in some way, we may likely be more willing to promote the components of the will of God by providing charity and demonstrate mercy. Think about it. How many times have we seen someone stranded on the side of the road, and instead of immediately pulling over to provide assistance, we first check our clocks and watches as if our ability to help others in need is dependent on whether or not we have the time to stop and assist and still have time to make it to our next appointment. I understand how difficult it is to attend to the will of God while being anchored in this life and on this earth, and I'm guilty. And what we must do in this world to just make it financially doesn't make it any easier. But much of what we do, we choose to do. If we choose to buy a new car every few years, then we'll always have a monthly car payment. If we purchase a big fancy house, then we're obligated to work more and harder. If we take trips to Hawaii or Europe, then we're obligated to work more. When we engage in this world, we get caught up in it. If we've read the message of the kingdom of heaven, then we know Jesus doesn't desire for us to invest ourselves in this world. He desires for our full attention and has asked us to attend to the will of God to the best of our ability and repent when we fail. Many of the parables and stories Jesus provides for us address the concept of being prepared. Although he was surely referring to us understanding the message and the messenger, preparation may be considered in other ways as well. If the conclusion of this study are accurate and the perceived lack of time is preventing us from doing the will of God, then it is in our best interest to better prepare ourselves for the day and allow more time to assist others in need that we may encounter en route to our destination. We must believe that Jesus and our Father are extremely busy watching over all the individual sheep on earth. It is inconceivable to imagine them ever being too rushed for time to attend to one of us in a time of need, or when we're presented for their consideration of our candidacy to enter the kingdom of heaven. In the kingdom of heaven, the will of God will reign supreme for the first time since man's creation, and our attendance to the will of God on earth while we're still alive will weigh heavy in determining that candidacy. I think I can state with high confidence, neither one of them will accept an excuse that the reason why we failed to attend to the will of God was because we were just too busy. But if they happened to entertain the proposition and we indicated we were so busy because we had to pay for all our stuff and adventures, I imagine they would just simply smile, refer us back to the message of the kingdom of heaven provided to us by Jesus, and simply state, our message to you was to not invest in this world, but the kingdom to come. If we have any expectations of achieving our hope, then we must attend to the will of God and always be prepared to demonstrate love, charity, mercy, forgiveness, and preaching. This is the message of the kingdom of heaven, and it was presented to us by Jesus and endorsed by our Father.